Well, it's an honor for me to be here today, and I'd like to thank the Simon Wiesenthal Center for having me. My journey into extremism started at a really young age. I did come from a normal, middle-class, working-class family. I didn't have a bad childhood or anything like that.
Excuse me, where did you grow up?
Rural Minnesota. In rural Minnesota. So the first black person I'd ever seen in real life, I mean, besides television, was when I was in the 4th grade. So that kind of shows you how isolated I was. A little bit about the history. My fascination with the Nazi Party came from my mother and my grandparents moved to the United States from Germany. My opa, my grandfather, was fought in the Third Reich. My great uncles fought in the Third Reich. One of my uncles was captured at Stalingrad and held until about the 1960s. So I had a deep fascination from a very young age about this. Now, I have to preface that by saying my family didn't push those values or ideals on me or anything like that. I just became fascinated by the whole ideology and trying to learn about it from a very young age. When I first got involved in the movement, let me back up just a little bit. When I was in school as a child, I would stand up for kids that were being bullied. I didn't like bullies. You know, there was a couple kids that were poor that were in our class, and they were picked on because they had dirty jeans or ripped jeans. I'd stand up for those kids. So my story might seem strange. You say, well, how is a young man that's sticking up for the underprivileged, joining something that the world sees as bullies, you know, as a horrible, horrific movement? My fascination brought me there, and thinking for so long that I was doing a good thing. You know, I didn't join it thinking, hey, I'm going to join the movement because I hate other people. It wasn't about hate to me. The hate came later. There's a lot of hate there. But I didn't join it because of hate. I didn't hate anyone. I thought I was going to save my race, save my people, save my country. And that's what the movement uses to bring so many others into it. I joined by the time I was 18. I looked longer than that to join, since I was at least 50 and I was trying to find a group. I joined at 18. I joined the National Socialist Movement, which is the closest thing to the German Nazi Party that is here in the United States. Over the next 27 years, I left the movement in March of 2019. Over the next 25 years, I built that movement up to be the largest Nazi party in the United States. And if you could imagine how hard that is to say that here today, now knowing what I know and having left. This is the first time I've ever been in a synagogue in my entire life. And
your mom's friend, you're okay.
Yeah. It's overwhelming.
But it's like TM said, a lot of the things that we believed that I taught for so many years were based on the protocols, the international Jew. We vilified people that we didn't even know. And having done that, we added to the polarization of this country. Looking back on that now, there was, you know, like a lot of people will ask, since I've been out, they'll ask, what was that moment? What was that one moment that brought you out of the movement? There is no one moment. There's a whole series of things. The de-radicalization process for me started when I moved to Detroit. Well, it didn't start right away when I moved to Detroit, but I moved to Detroit in December of '07. And after a number of years there, the city of Detroit and its people helped to de-radicalize me. The whites are the minority in Detroit. So dealing with Muslim people, black people, people of all different backgrounds, and realizing these people are really not any different than you or I. You know, we all have the same struggles. But inside that bubble or that echo chamber that you are in when you are in the movement, everyone you know is inside that echo chamber, inside that bubble. You have this mentality like it's us against the world mentality, and everyone else that's in there reinforces that hate and reinforces that bias and that those misconceptions. And when you try to leave that bubble or get outside of it, you are already hated because of what you become, what you allowed yourself to get involved in. And this will sound probably kind of funny to people here, and just let me finish where I'm going with it, if you will. One of the things that helped me to de-radicalize as I was coming out around 2016, when I started realizing I don't want to be part of this movement anymore, but my business was involved in it, my entire adult life was involved with the National Socialist Movement. That's all I did. So I felt like, you know, this is my bed, I'm just gonna lie in it, this is it, this is life, this is what it is. There's nothing else. So I tried changing the group, making it more palatable for the public, things like that, which looking back now, it's like, well, how can you sugarcoat National Socialism? You can't. But at the time I thought, oh, that makes sense. I could do that. I could sugarcoat it. I can make it more palatable for the American people. You can't. But when you're in that bubble, that's all you're seeing. And the radicalization process, you're not seeing it. And there was so many different things that are going through my head. But there was a woman that I met, a filmmaker. I was filming in a film called White Right Meeting the Enemy, and you can see it Netflix. I don't think it's on Netflix. On YouTube. It's on YouTube now. But in that film, I met the filmmaker Dia Khan, and she was talking to me about economic platforms. We were talking about the economic platforms of the group, and she says, you know, Jeff, what you're saying is, I understand it. I understand the economics, and it makes a lot of sense. But why is it that you're just talking for white people on these things? And you know, kind of winked at me and said, or just some white people, because you know most white people didn't like National Socialism. But in our heads, we were going to save the white race. This was saving our country, all this sort of thing. And something clicked. And I was like, whoa. I spewed out the movement's answer because I was on camera. But in the back of my head, the wheels started turning and saying, whoa, Jeff, you couldn't answer that. You couldn't answer that. You didn't have a proper answer. So I started questioning it. Why is that? You know, because I always prided myself. I was raised to be honest, don't lie, all this sort of thing. And I just lied on camera. Mm-hmm. So now I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, I knew I had to lie on camera because I was representing the movement. That was my job. That's what I had to do. But something was saying, wait a minute, you couldn't answer that. You didn't have an answer for that. So I started thinking more and more. And originally when I met with Dia, I told her she had 1 hour of my time. And after that, she kept teasing me. She kept saying, hey, we're in like the 3rd week of filming. What are you still doing here? You were only gonna film for an hour. You gave me an hour of your time. What's changed here? And I said, I don't know. You intrigue me. Something about you, it was the questions. She was challenging my thinking, and it was unworking things, and it was her compassion and her empathy. Well, towards the end of the filming, she had said to me, hey, I want you to look at this picture. And she showed me a picture of her as a small child and with her father at a protest. And she said, you know, Jeff, as a child, your movements like yours, made me hate myself, made me feel like I was ugly, made me not feel worthy, basically made her feel like complete garbage.
She's from Pakistan.
She's from Pakistan and she's a Muslim. And something inside me, I feel like just kind of broke, because no one should feel that way, especially a child. And here I thought, I'm some sort of, like what TM was saying, you felt like you were a superhero in the movement. Like here I thought I was doing a good thing, and I could feel the pain in this woman sitting across from me. I could feel it. I could feel the hurt that she went through, and I knew it was real. It was not a made up thing like we always felt like in the movement. And I don't say this out of disrespect, I'm just telling about how we felt at that time. We felt like the Holocaust was a lie, that it was made up, that the Jews were saying this stuff to fool us and to control us. And we really believed that. It's not, we weren't saying it because to be evil, we really believed that. So to feel this woman's hurt, it bothered me. And in the film, you can see it because they zoom in on my face and they can see this, that it didn't sit right with me. So by the end of the film, she had kept teasing me and saying, you know, I'm like your bratty little sister. You can't get rid of me. You can't get rid of me. And we hugged, and I said, you have a brother for the rest of your life. You know, I'll always look out for you. And she just kind of broke a little bit. I think we both broke a little bit, I think, you know. And that sort of compassion and that sort of human understanding really has some sort of magic to it. The same woman that I brought in around the NSM to film us, that we always thought we were going to use these films and all the different things that we did to promote our ideology, to get our ideology out, you know, to bring attention to it. And Tia specifically, through that compassion, through that empathy, through that understanding, helped to give me the courage to leave. And there's another individual here today. I saw him a minute ago, but he was also in the film. Can you stand up, Ken, please? This young man back here, he was also part of the National Socialist Movement. He served on security for me. He actually left before I did. And Dia also, her compassion brought Ken out.
It's like a Jedi.
Right.
Think about compassion got you out. But now where are you? You've been in something for 27 years. It's been your vocation, your family, your life, your belief system. So number one, where do you go next? Number two, how do you start meeting? Wonderful. Okay, compassion brought you out, but where do you go next? And then talk a little bit about, you know, how do you get a job? Look who you were for 27 years. Let's talk about your journey since you wanted out and what happens to formers, and TM can share that as well.
Well, for me, when I first left, I retired. You know, like TM also mentioned, retiring. When you retire from the movement's okay with that. You know, they look at you and they go, okay, well, he's retiring. And I had people calling me up and say, well, you done with your little vacation? Are you coming back? We need you back. You need to come back. But they don't look upon you as a traitor. They just figured, oh, maybe he burnt out, or, you know, it's time to move on. I retired. I passed the organization on to my chief of staff. And I went through what I call a decompression period, where I pretty much didn't talk to anybody, just a couple of people. And I had to wrap my mind around all of that. Like, I'm in the process, I'm closing down my business. I mean, I have closed down my business, but at that time I was in the process of closing it down. This is all I've done for my whole life. So here, what skills do I have? And I was talking to a couple of the guys, because there was that transition where, okay, now other people are going to run this organization. Here's all the things that you need. You know, this is the property of the organization. Here you go. And the couple of people that I was still talking to, they're like, you're really gonna leave? You're really gonna leave us after all these years? You said you were gonna be in this till you were 90 years old, and you need to stay, you need to do this. And I was like, no, I'm done, I'm out, I'm done. Leave me alone about it. Oh, okay, well, you know, I'm just trying to help. What are you gonna do for a job? what are you gonna put on your application? Commander of the NSM for 25 years? Who's gonna hire you? You know, I mean, it was, and those were the fears that I already had. You know, those are the things that were trapped in my mind going, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Because even in retirement, I could have kept my business open. I could have kept.
What was your business so people understand why you didn't?
My business was selling merchandise. It was NSM Records, is the company. So it was white power music, T-shirts, patches, all the it was probably the largest. Well, in the United States, it was the largest of the record labels. So I felt like if I kept that open, that's being kind of hypocritical, and it's contributing to the problem that I fostered for so many years. So yeah, I think that answers it.
And then and then TM, why don't you speak about it for a second? I know the answers for both of you. So talk a little bit about your families. Both of you mentioned your families. They weren't haters. You became Nazis in their eyes. How did they react? What kind of relationships do you have?
Well, first of all, I had the same experience as Jeff had. I mean, I was in the movement for about 17 years. What do you put on the application? European leader of the KKK. I mean, right, and even, that's why I didn't talk about my past for 10 years. I got out in 2002, 2003. I didn't talk about it until I got more or less outed by the media in Germany, pretty brutally actually. I was not in control. I had regular business at the time then, finally. It took me long to build it up. And I lost everything because who wanted to do business with a former Nazi? And I had a lot of Turkish Muslims. Germany has a great Turkish Muslim population. A lot of Turkish people as business partners, friends from everywhere, and about 80% turned their back on me. Germany is a little bit more judgmental than the USA. America loves redemption. Germany has a little bit of a harder time because of its past for a good reason. I get it. But it was really hard. And that also led to the fact that my family, part of my family turned their back on me. My oldest sister, she doesn't talk to me to this day. Even though I've got very good press in Germany now, there's one documentary, they made me look like a hero. It was almost obnoxious so much. And she didn't want to see it. Her son, my nephew, actually texted me on Facebook, said, "Hey uncle, great job. I believe people can change now." I sent it to my mom, she doesn't want to watch. My mom, I'm finally in touch with my mom too. She's sober finally, since 15 years. I'm very proud of her now. And there was once a newspaper article, she wanted to show my sister. She said, "No, leave me alone. She's just ashamed of my past. That's not her brother." And that's a lot of PTSD that's there. That's not excuse, these are just explanations. And even though I have a good job now and everything, I have my own company, but still that PTSD is still there. Even sometimes I put a lot on Facebook when I'm here, whatever, put that out there. But whenever I have a new when I have a new business relationship, I'm always a little bit leery if they see about my past, if I'm getting that job. Like I just worked with a county in Mississippi for a bigger job, and I really thought that might be on the way. I'm working for a fireworks company in the Southeast. When I started working with them, I didn't tell them about it. They found out on Facebook, of course. We never have really talked about it, but I thought it would actually be in the way between my position, because I'm over the operations in Memphis and Mississippi, and I thought it would be in the way. Fortunately, it wasn't, but the fear is always there, and I think it will never go away. It's unfortunate.
And Jeff, what's your relationship with family members, and how did your parents react to you joining a hate movement? Doesn't make sense in your background. Didn't make sense. How did they react to it?
Oh,
Who came?
Yeah, my family was not happy about it at all. You know, my involvement in the movement really affected my family in a bad way. One, my last name is not real common, and so they weren't hard to find as far as what they went through. My mother is my mother's passed on now, Unfortunately, she didn't get to see what I do now, but I know she's watching over me. But and I lost a lot of death in my family. Like my grandparents both passed in the last couple of years, and so did my mother. So that reflecting on that helped, I think, a lot too. But my family was not supportive of what I did. And my mother was an attorney, and she was up for a judgeship. She was elected for a judgeship in the state of Minnesota. A formality in the state is basically the governor just signs off on the judgeships. That's how it was explained to me, anyways. Well, at that point in time, the governor had called my mother and said, "Your father fought in the Third Reich. Your son is a Nazi. We don't think you're fit to be a judge in this state." So my mother's dreams, basically, her aspiration in life, what she wanted to do, was destroyed by my involvement in the movement, and I had to carry that every day. So, yeah, so that's...
I think it's fascinating in both your backgrounds, both of you have children, and neither of you, though they heard it in the home, you brought into the movement or taught this hate to. So kind of explain to us, how does that happen? I mean, you would think, all of us, we have our beliefs, our system, we teach our children our traditions, our systems, our beliefs. So how are you hating everybody, out there fighting the world to make it all white supremacy, and not teaching your children or bringing them into the group?
I think we knew, something deep down said that we wanted to, I think as parents we wanted to shield our children from that. And there's two different aspects to that, because there's some people that'll say that we're driven into the movement like a defense. That's how I viewed it, like I'm in the movement because I'm going to defend my children. I've heard other people that have left that because they had children, they wanted out of the movement, and that's a more sensible aspect right there. But I knew all that time, and I think TM will probably say the same thing or similar. It's like, we chose this life. It's a hard life. It's a heavy burden to carry. Ken and I were just talking before I came up here, and he said,
the burden? What's the burden? You hated me. What's your burden? I don't understand.
It's a hard life to.
Isn't it easy to hate? Isn't it easier to hate than to be open-minded?
No, it's much easier to love than hate. It really is. It's better. It's better. It's so much better. What I'm saying is, like, when like he had said, when he left the movement, it was like a giant weight came off of his back, and I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
It was like a weight was lifted. But as far as the kids go, we knew enough that I didn't want this life for my children. Absolutely not. This is a hard life to be involved in. To wake up every day and feel like you're at war with the world is a crappy way to look at life and society. I did not want that. I did not wish that on my children. And thank goodness they did not, get involved.
Well, it was the same for me. You said, I would say hating is easier than being open-minded, but there's still a burden. It's destroying you. It doesn't make you a happy man. It is exhausting. It is easy in the first place, but it creates an exhausting life because you wake up with that hate, and it's always high time. You're waiting, the race war is about to start, the Jews are taking over the world, the police is coming arresting you, and so forth. I got paranoid. It was really bad, and it was the whole day, and I took it to my bed. But as he said, some farmers got out of the movement because they didn't want to put their children in there. I had 3 children that were born while I was in the movement. I felt like I'm doing my duty for the white race, producing that offspring. It encouraged me, but at the same time, I did not teach that to my children. And the reason I thought I was smart, I thought if I pressure that on them and push it on them, what do kids do if you push too much on them? They will do exactly the opposite. And I knew that because I did it too. And the other thing was too, when my son was like 6 or 7 years old, I was the leader of the European clan at the time. His best friend was a mixed kid. And I knew if I tell him not to do that, not to play with that kid, he will still do it. And I thought, I'm super smart. I told him, I thought, well, he will realize that the black kid will just start stealing and lying and all the stuff that I thought they would do, and he will see that I'm right. He will figure it out by himself. My God, I'm glad that you're smarter than I. But it led to one funny situation. I may recall it real quick. We had that house with a super big window and had the house full of Klan people. And he passed the window on a bicycle, and the next kid right next to him, all the Klan people like, isn't that your son? And I'm like, and I explained that to them too. Well, he will figure it out by himself. Man, you're smart. But again, they never picked up the belief system, even though they were exposed to that. They heard the music, they saw the people. I didn't hide it from them, but I didn't push it either. But they turned out fine. I'm so glad.
We're gonna stop for questions in 2 minutes. I have 2 quick questions. One is a comment. We keep talking about the music. I've seen some of the lyrics because I've worked with you for a while. I think, has anybody ever heard any of the lyrics that they're singing? The one on the slide, can you repeat the last line? I can. I've seen it too many.
It is hard for me because I don't believe in that anymore. I know how hateful it is. It's a burden.
Purposes,
it was a song. It was a song about the Holocaust, that it never happened, but that the foolproof plan would be mass extermination to get rid of your enemy, and the chorus line was 6 million more.
And it's still being played.
That's still being played, and that was not a German band singing that. The band was from Dallas, Texas. I knew these guys in person. I believe he knew them too. And they're still around, that for sure.
And the reason I asked you to do that was I think that we need to understand what people are being exposed to, what students are being exposed to, because unfortunately that's the ignorance, whereas we're trying to counter it with the education. I have one last question from me, and then we'll open it to the audience. Something that just occurred to me that I've heard from both of you tonight is, and if I'm wrong, tell me, the perception I'm getting is you really hated the Jews more than the blacks. Everything seems very Zionist, anti-Semites, Jewish. You know, when I think of, yes, Nazis, I think of anti-Semites or, anti-Jewish. When I think of Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists, I do think of, I'm sorry to put everybody in one boat, but anybody other than white. Why are the Jews more hated than any other minority? And if you're going to tell me that in the media we're doing a bad job, because we're obviously not.
My opinion, if you look especially in Europe, and I think, and that's actually a very brave thing why it happened, because the Jews were the only ones that wouldn't convert. Convert to Christianity. When, like what you saw in Europe, what happened with the Romans when they adopted Christianity in the year 300, they started to convert everybody. And who didn't want to be converted, they fought and slaughtered. Like Charlemagne, who's the big hero, he was known as the Saxony slaughter because the Saxons didn't want to convert. So he killed them off. And he killed everybody else off. And who still didn't want to convert, that was the Jews. So the Jews, of course, developing or having different language and praying very different from the others, made them look different, and nobody wanted to talk. And then you had like the 15th century. That's why Luther became an anti-Semite, because he tried to convert the Jews too, and he couldn't. Made him bitter. Then he started hating them, and it went on. It looks like the Jews always have been the scapegoat because they were actually the most brave as the most oppressed at the same time.
And we're not going to get into discussion on this, but going back to what you said earlier, and the irony of all of that is that all these religions worship somebody who is Jewish.
That's the big irony.
That's the irony of the whole thing. That's so hard to wrap your head around. We won't get into conversation. But do you have an opinion why you think that the Jews are more hated? Not that I want anybody to be hated, but it's fascinating.
Right, and for me it was in the de-radicalization process, my hatred of the Jewish people was the last thing to let go, of. Yes. I mean, I wasn't racist anymore by 2016, but the anti-Semitism didn't leave until I was able to decompress out of that movement. That's how deeply ingrained it was. It was the driving force. And it doesn't make any sense, but part of it is that there wasn't that dialogue. I didn't know any Jewish people. I knew one Jewish woman, one Orthodox Jewish woman in Detroit when I was in the movement. That was it.
And what was that relationship? She knew who you were, why?
Yeah, she knew who I was, and she just was.
And she continued friending you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's open it up for questions. Okay, here. Forgive me for pointing. I have no choice. Go ahead.
So thank you both for being here, Tam. I want to make sure you don't think we were only applying for Jeff, because we sort of applying under him.
No, you can.
Okay. It's a little chilling to hear that it's difficult to be in this fight. And I'm thinking it's difficult to be in the fight when you're in the minority, but I imagine that when the majority feels the same way, it's not such a difficult, painful thing to wake up to every morning. How do we, when you were in your bubble, and if God forbid our entire environment becomes that bubble, what do we do? How do we break into the bubble for other people so that other people become like you instead of continuing to hate?
We have to look at, and it's hard to do, especially for people that are being vilified and hated by the people that are in the movement. But if we can approach people with compassion, with understanding, sort of like the story with myself and the filmmaker that I'm friends with, in that sort of way, to listen and for both parties to listen and to understand. And it's like TM often says, you know, would you want to talk to the person with the swastika tattoo or the Klan tattoo? No, of course not, you know, but somehow if we can break down those barriers and get beyond them, and because I see it as like a prison of the mind. You know, it's like the mind is in prison. You're not seeing outside of that bubble. And so many people, even in the NSM, never even met a Muslim person before until they met that woman. And it's the same even with myself. I never gave a Jewish person a chance. Just automatically believed all these false narratives. So if we can have some sort of dialogue and understanding, and I think it's got to start at the school level, when they're children too, and not like a forced thing like you need to listen to this, but like, hey, let's celebrate Polish Day today. Let's celebrate Jewish Day today. Let's celebrate this and make it fun, and then they can understand and learn about all the cultures. I think that will. There's no cure-all. We're not going to fix all of the problems and the evils in the world all at once. And some people are just evil and they can't be reached. But I think a lot of people can if we break down those perceptions, those stereotypes. And that I know it's hard to hear, but like stereotyping that guy with the swastika or Klan tattoo. If we could have just a conversation with them and erase that hatred, maybe they'll be getting that tattoo covered up.
So it's interesting, we introduced them today to some leadership at the Illinois State Board of Education, which at the end of this I'll explain why, that we're working with. And the people that we met today would like us to help bring their stories, their narratives into the schools, because the education has to happen on the lower and the grades. High schools, I've been to a few high schools, we're going tomorrow also. To have this dialogue between groups that are different. Wiesenthal Center has been doing a lot of work in interfaith in our community. We've sponsored Shabbat dinners for faith leaders of all faiths to attend. We have to be willing to have conversations in safe environments that make us uncomfortable. And with all due respect, I'm part of this community. We live in a bubble. We are not reaching out to our neighbors. Rabbi Howard is amazing. I don't know if he's here. I know he had to go kiss his kids good night. He deserves a lot of credit. When there's issues that happen to other faiths, he makes sure that we rally together, that we go to the mosque, that we reach out and say we stay together as a community. And those are the things that are going to change things. There was another question. Well, there was one behind you. Excuse me, then I'll go to you. Yes, the young man.
This is something a friend of mine that I unfriended on Facebook several months ago started posting, and it is actually, like, if this is actually something similar, like, posted a bunch of songs about how you should being white is a negative at judging, and listening to it, it sounded a lot like sort of the entry level. So was that kind of is that similar to the stuff that got it started go on your path, like the stuff like saying don't like just that stuff that's basically that's basically covering it up, saying don't judge me for being white as a code for
absolutely. It's a sugar coated message.
Yeah.
And you think it's right because like he told me earlier, he presented his party, they took the swastika away and said, no, we are a white rights organization. And it sounds like, I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, everybody has rights, right? So white people do too, so let's join that as a white person. And then you join that, you think you're on the right track, and then you get that hate presented all of a sudden. And that's all you get presented with, like in a cult. And you don't talk to anybody outside in the bubble anymore. And you get fed with that, and you start believing that. It's like people could come and tell you, the sky is blue, you see it, you start believing it's green. And this is exactly because you get it fed.
That's because you're called.
I was wondering if you would address the issue of violence in these groups, and you know, as there have been more recent anti-Semitic attacks, violent attacks against the Jewish community, how that felt like when you were still in that group? Was that how did you deal with that?
That's a great question. And for me, you know, what we're saying, there was a process of de-radicalization. The violence was the final straw. That was the last straw for me because, you know, as I was saying, like, I felt like this is your bed, you're gonna lie in it, this is all you know, this is what you do. Those attacks, like the Tree of Life Synagogue, like the mosque in New Zealand, the Walmart shooting, the church shootings, all of these things adding up, it was too much. As a human being, even though people in the NSM would say, well, it wasn't an NSM member, so why do we care? It wasn't one of our people that did it, so it didn't matter. But the radicalization process, the message that was being preached, that we preached, may or could have added to that. You know, that it definitely adds to the polarization and the hate. So these self-radicalizers, the ones that have went out and done those evil and violent things, I see more of it potentially coming if we don't combat this in a correct way. If we don't stop people from thinking like this or trying to fix it, more of those things are going to happen. And I couldn't, for me personally, I couldn't stand by and excuse it or keep saying, well, it's bad, but it wasn't one of us that did it, it was a different group or somebody else over here. At some point, as a human being, you have to just say, you know what, something's really off here if people from the ideology are going out and murdering people. And now it's so bad amongst some of these people in the alt-right and some of these groups, they're calling these people martyrs. They see it as being martyrdom to go in and murder innocent people. How is that? Our thinking was when we joined this, we're warriors. You know, we're proud, strong warriors for our people. That's the kind of stuff I preached in speeches for years. We're warriors for our people. That's not a warrior that walks into a house of worship and murders people in cold blood. That's a coward. How is that martyrdom? And there's people that believe it, that really believe it. How can anybody that's got any kind of humanity at all stand with something like that? And I think that's how we need to reach them. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Interestingly enough, when I just might add something, and we did that both in the last stage or phase of our leadership in our groups, was we told our members not to commit any violent crimes, and for one reason, because I think if there would have been no consequences, we would have let it go and they would have done it. But we thought, okay, you're no good to us in prison, you know? But the other thing was too, what made you think, if you have to correct your members and tell them not to go out and commit violent crimes, the problem must be you, because you're teaching them that stuff in the first place. If you wouldn't teach a hateful, violent message, why do you have to tell them not to do it? But we didn't see it that way back then.
But we do have other formers who work at our education facility in Los Angeles, the Museum of Tolerance, who are now volunteers who are formers who were violent. And one gentleman actually came to us on his journey, and he had to do with a child, and he wanted to get out so that his child wouldn't learn this hate. But he was so violent, he remembers beating somebody up and horrifically, and thought he left him for dead in the alley. Very long story short, another journey, that young person that he left for dead came to volunteer at the Museum of Tolerance separately because his mother threw him out at 13 and he was gay, and anyways, they realized that's a God thing. I don't care what anybody says. They met each other, and there's a whole journey about forgiveness. And the man Tim, who thought he left him for dead, was so grateful to learn that he wasn't. But it took Matthew, the gentleman who was beaten up, a long time to come to forgiveness to him, as you can imagine. And there was a documentary produced about them, From Hate to Hope. I think it's available on Netflix, but it's an interesting journey. So there are those extremists who were in the movement that unfortunately were violent other than just murder. I'm sorry, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I have a question. You talked a little bit about coming into the movement, or other people coming into the movement, and having discussions and reading materials and developing these philosophies. Am I clear about that? So when somebody comes into these movements, how long does it take before they accept the information?
The ideology you're asking.
Yeah, yes, the ideology. In other words, I'd like to understand more about that whole process that takes place for people where they come in and then develop this new philosophy.
Back in our days, and we probably joined about the same time, around 1990.
Okay.
It took longer because it took longer to receive the next cassette tape or the next material until the internet came out. And that went fast. And nowadays you have social media and YouTube. And there's a lot of people, they start very, very small. They hear something about, if it comes to anti-Semitism, for example, I heard that, how quick it can go. 2 years ago, during the midterms, when they were talking about the border wall, somebody said, oh, it's George Soros financing everything to bring them in to destroy everything and create communism. Right. Somebody else said, oh, George Soros, rich, Jewish. Oh, by the way, Russells, Rockefellers. And people Google that or put it in YouTube. When you get links, they get suggested and everything. It's a rabbit hole. They fall in, and then they end up with literature like the Protocols of the Atlas of Zion. And it can go within a week all of a sudden, because those people get sucked in. We had to wait weeks or sometimes months to get material, and they get it within a second. They get the next instant. And within a week they can be radicalized, and depending in what position they were in before they got radicalized, they're sometimes ready to just shoot up a place.
So how can we as individuals do anything proactive or positive? Because as you said, the internet is so rapid and information is disseminated so quickly. How can we as individuals work within that framework at all?
When it comes to the internet, it is especially difficult.
Report what you see, first of all.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Everybody sees things on Facebook, nobody's reporting them. It's not easy to report, but there is a report button. Use it. Absolutely use it. Makes you uncomfortable, it's a problem, report it. Sorry to interrupt.
But that's one thing. That's one thing that kids can do when they're aware that this is a hateful message. The problem is those kids are not in danger of getting radicalized. They just feel uncomfortable, don't know what to do. These are the ones that need to report, either on Facebook or with apps of the time, Wiesenthal, Center like Combat Hate. For kids, and I talked to a lot of parents that had that problem. How do I reach my child that is just falling into that rabbit hole? And this is, it may take a minute, but I'll tell you a story about that. We're not talking to each other anymore. Anytime we talk to somebody with a contrary opinion, we sit down with the attempt to convert that person and tell the person, your opinion is wrong and my opinion is right. And you have a child that gets some kind of message